If you watch any football, you know the phrase,
Here we go. Here we go. Here we go. Here we go. Here we go.
here we go. It comes from Fabrizio Romano, a journalist. The reason why I did that is because all this guy does is tweet nonstop, 24/7, just to farm engagement. And I don't know if you can call him a journalist if he just does that. It's kind of funny how the sentiment around Fabrizio changed in the past couple of years. You cannot find a more likable figure than Fabrizio. I mean, he's literally one of the most followed people in the world for a reason. The fact is, there's not a single transfer that Fabrizio does not know about. You can hide all you want, but Fabrizio will find out because he's always watching. On one hand, what Fabrizio bought to football transfers is great because he's a reliable guy, and before Fabrizio, there was a lot of noise. It was like the Wild West. I remember following all these ITKs who knew a guy at the club, and guess what? They were lying. But over the years, there have been so many controversies that made people hate Fabrizio. To get to the bottom of why Fabrizio is a polarizing figure, we have to go all the way back to the very beginning of his career. A young Fabrizio wanted to be a reporter since he was 16. Before that, he wanted to be a footballer. Just like all of us, man. There was a moment when all of our lives, when every little boy realizes there's level to this shit and you're completely ass because you look around and these guys are doing something you'll never ever do. That passion for journalism started with writing reports and sending it to local Italian newspapers. In 2010, he wrote for Tutto Mercato Web, a transfer gossip site. His first big break was then reporting on the unknown Mauro Icardi from Barcelona to Sampdoria. If you have any ball knowledge, that name should be familiar, as Lady Icardi returned the favor by giving Fabrizio the exclusive scoop of Sampdoria to Inter, a much bigger story. But before all that, when he turned 18, he received an offer he could not refuse. He could work under Damasio, a reporter at Sky Sports. It is there where Fabrizio learned what made him the transfer guru he is today. The secret was to simply make a lot of connections that you could trust. Fabrizio was told not to stay in the office, go outside, meet people, and that's exactly what he did. Essentially, he was told to touch grass. Milan was where the action was, so Fabrizio would wander in hopes of finding people who knew what deals were happening. Fabrizio was searching for information like a rat searches for food at all times, which made him different from other online journalists who just stayed in their rooms. I mean, he knows the number plates and the wives of Bayern players by heart, and he has eyes in hotels, restaurants, and airports. You can't go anywhere without Fabrizio knowing. That and Fabrizio's ridiculous work ethic, where he's glued to his phone 24/7 during the busy transfer window, makes me convinced he is crazy. Just look at his face. It's no wonder he beats everybody to the transfers. We all love Fabrizio, right? Right? Now you know the man. We can finally find out if the criticisms against him are fair, starting from light, straight up evil. Starting off with the fact that Fabrizio Romano is a known tap-in merchant. First of all, great diss. I wish I could come up with that. Why is he a tap-in merchant? The thing that Fabrizio does a lot of the time is he tweets out something someone has already covered for weeks. But all Fabrizio has to do is here we go, and he gets all of the credit. He does at the person. Fabrizio is the one getting the headline. Fabrizio is the one getting the engagement. He can't stand somebody else having the limelight. He just needs to steal someone else's credit. What a greedy guy. Fabrizio takes all the fun out of transfers because of how long we know a transfer is happening. Very often we get so many tweets out of every transfer, so that by the time that transfer happens, it's not very exciting at all. Not to mention when Fabrizio was covering a huge transfer saga, he would tweet non-stop. The same exact tweet, not a single word changing. It's damn exhausting, bro. There's no need for 100 tweets, 5 separate YouTube videos, Instagram posts, when nothing changes. I know it's his job, but can this guy seriously shut up? All this has to be for engagement. You think I'm exaggerating? Just look at the Florian Wirtz transfer. It's insane how much he tweeted. You'd think he would stop after the here we go happens, but he spoils when the medical is happening. The damn medical is not safe. And he spoils when the announcement is going to happen. That is just insanity. At this point, Fabrizio can tell us about what time a player is going to take a shit and what it smells like. It's not only transfer that Fabrizio spoils. He can't let us have any fun when it comes to anything football related. Imagine having fun while Fabrizio is around. It's 2024 and Real Madrid won the UCL. And clearly, the main man that's going to win the Ballon d'Or is going to be Vinicius Jr. The next closest competition is Rodri, but he's a midfielder, and everyone knows, although he did have an excellent season winning the Euros, the Premier League, there's no way a midfielder has more impact than an attacker. But to everyone's shock, Rodri won the Ballon d'Or, with no Real Madrid players present for the ceremony because they were protesting the result, except it wasn't shocking at all. Can you guess why it wasn't shocking? Because Fabrizio Romano ruined it and spoiled everything. There's no need to even watch the Ballon d'Or ceremony, because Fabrizio got you. Not the only thing he spoils. You can't even retire without Fabrizio right there to milk you for views. Andre Iniesta, one of the greatest midfielders of all time, can't even announce a heartfelt retirement to his fans and supporters. Instead, I guess Fabrizio made it his job to give us a soulless post ruining everything. I mean, what joy do you get out about not letting an athlete say goodbye to the sport they were playing since they were a little kid, man? At least he learned his lesson, because when it came to Toni Kroos's retirement, he said he knew about it. I can't imagine the pain Fabrizio felt when he forfeited those views, man. I know it nearly killed him. What a man. Perhaps the most disturbing thing Fabrizio may have done is the way he handles the death of football players. Last year, on July 3rd, 2025, Diego Jota sadly passed away after a fatal car crash in Spain, along with his brother, Andre Silva. It wasn't the fact that Fabrizio covered Jota's death, which is fine. I mean, he's a journalist. No one's mad about that. It's the incessant posting. I swear, this guy tweets the death of a footballer like a transfer saga, constantly posting updates about footballers' reactions to his Facebook. Tell me, if this is not for the views, what's the point of aggregating posts, which we can all see on our own? I swear, this guy Fabrizio Romano is a leech. He just clings on to anything relevant and sucks it dry for views. This isn't the only controversy around the death of a footballer. Can you imagine that? On February 6th, Christian Atsu died in the aftermath of an earthquake that hit Turkey. It wasn't until much later, on February 18th, his body was found under his apartment. And all that mess the earthquake caused, there was some hope that Atsu would be alive and his friends and family would receive some good news. So when the most trusted transfer guru announces on February 7th that Atsu was in fact safe in the hospital with a foot injury, you can imagine how cruel that was. It was false hope that got back to his family, because the name Fabrizio Romano means something, although I'd argue it shouldn't mean anything. There is no way Fabrizio, a man who makes a whole living and his whole brand based off of credibility, should post a rumor like that. It shouldn't be the case that Fabrizio is more worried about getting football transfers correct than someone's life. In his time, Fabrizio posts a lot of footballers. You can tell he has his favorites, Lamine Yamal and Mbappe. I mean, for obvious reasons, which makes sense. They're going to get him the views, and there's one person that he likes, though, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. That person is none other than Mason Greenwood. The reason that Mason Greenwood is problematic is because he's not a good guy. In fact, he's done some very terrible things. He physically abused and assaulted his girlfriend. There's a whole lot of evidence to back up these claims. The only reason why he hasn't been convicted of these crimes was because the case was dropped because the victim ultimately did not want to go to trial. I'll just say allegedly, so I don't go to jail. So all these things are allegedly. Imagine how weird it is that Fabrizio posts a lot of positive updates on Greenwood after all this transpired. Greenwood transferred to Getafe, and there are so many posts about how happy Getafe fans are getting a player of Greenwood's quality, but no context onto why he's there. Every time Greenwood scores a goal or gets an award, Fabrizio's like a proud father, posting his achievement. So it was no surprise when Greenwood transferred to Marseille. There was a lot of pushback from the mayor of Marseille saying that he did not want the club to be covered in shame. Instead of covering that, Fabrizio posts are all dandy. Posts about the coach of Marseille saying that Mason Greenwood is actually a great guy and is in fact misunderstood. I mean, unless you're blind, you have to see that Fabrizio is clearly trying to build up Greenwood's characters. But why would Fabrizio do this? The reason why is his connections, going back to his roots. Just like all those years ago, Fabrizio was starting out, he realized he had to maintain great relationships with his sources. Fabrizio has a you scratch my back, I scratch your back mentality. By promoting Greenwood, while it doesn't look good, he has a great relationship with his agent. I mean, who else is morally corrupt enough to bend over backwards and be agent's mouthpiece? It's why you see Fabrizio cover the most random and boring transfers you'll ever see. No, we do not care about some random guy transferring to the Mongolian 3rd Division. Fabrizio is also accused of making posts for cash. In 2024, a Danish outlet broke documents showing a company connected to Fabrizio was selling posts. The offer was received by the marketing director, and he was shocked. After a couple of emails back and forth, the services range from a post to create buzz around the players or the club itself. Apparently, you can even get a direct line to Fabrizio, and the rates go like €1,000 for a post and €6,000 for a video, with the message and time of publication. That's actually not bad. I honestly think Fabrizio was selling himself a little short there. In fact, after the article got published, Fabrizio threatened the author for legal action. Again, knowing Fabrizio, this type of stuff is like right up his alley. But now you know Fabrizio has no backbone and should never be called a journalist. And I think that is also evident with this coverage of the two wars. Yeah, we're getting political here. Compare Fabrizio coverage of the Ukraine-Russia war with the Palestine-Israel war, and you see what I mean. On face value, it seems really weird for me to even be talking about this, or really weird for politics to be mixed in with football, which is escape from the world. But no matter how you slice it, it's impossible to separate the two. Don't forget that footballers aren't just supposed to kick a ball around and shut up. They're affected by these things directly. Footballers have huge platforms, and if they want to speak out and help as much people, let them do that. With the Russia and Ukraine war, Fabrizio made it very clear, made an effort to highlight where he stood by posting footballers' reactions, which were all pro-Ukraine. Nothing wrong with that. Whether it was Malinovsky's celebration with the no war in Ukraine or the manager of Shakhtar Donetsk talk about how the war is affecting. Okay, there's nothing wrong with covering politics, but what's with the complete silence on the Israel-Palestine war when a lot of footballers have spoken about it? It seems like Fabrizio is just trying to be politically incorrect instead of doing his damn job. Mind you, it looks a lot worse when you see the people that have talked about it. Pep Guardiola, perhaps the greatest ever manager, had a passionate rant about, despite having all this information, we see the genocide happening in Gaza. We completely left them alone without any support. How about Mo Salah criticizing UEFA for not telling people how the Palestinian Pele had died? Or more recently, Fabrizio could have covered one of his favorite players, Lamine Yamal, about the simple act of waving the Palestine flag enraged an Israel defense officer. Instead, it's nothing but crickets from damn Fabrizio Romano. This guy loves to talk, but he's silent on this one issue. Fabrizio simply because he's too afraid of making himself look bad in front of club owners and agents or anyone powerful. But how surprised would you be if I told you Fabrizio would do anything for money and connections because he decided to praise the humanitarian work of Saudi Arabia? Take it. Did you get that? Saudi Arabia? Humanitarian work? Does that make sense? I almost can't believe the shamelessness of this guy. This is blatant propaganda, and it's part of Saudi's efforts to use sports or other forms of entertainment for people just to ignore the mountains of dead bodies. Ignore that and watch Ronaldo hit the Let me tell you, you truly made it when the Crown Prince sends you stupid amount of money. But if you have any conscience, probably should say no. I know Fabrizio claims to be a journalist, but so do you know what happens to journalists in Saudi Arabia? I mean, I doubt Fabrizio cares about these things. The only thing he cares about is the money, man. He got his priorities straight. Another reason why Fabrizio would want to be in bed with the Saudis, which is somehow still insane to me to this day, is that the Saudis just own a whole football team in England, Newcastle United. Man, the things that people do for money, it's impossible to decipher whether or not Fabrizio's post is paid for because he doesn't even have to disclose anything. Now that you know why Fabrizio is very hated, we should just take 1 second to realize who Fabrizio is as a person. From the very beginning, Fabrizio has been very off-putting because of the way he presents himself is just annoying. I mean, he's literally arguing with 12-year-olds. I mean, it's like the president of the United States just being on Twitter all day. You know, that would never happen. You know, often he would get hate from 12-year-olds, and the best thing you should do is ignore it. If you ignore it, they won't get the satisfaction of getting in your head. Instead, Fabrizio takes the very idiotic approach of trying to dunk on them or ratio them, which is just, you know, stupid, childish. I don't know. Why are you doing this? I feel like he gets off on this, but Fabrizio, can't you act like Fabrizio Romano, a man that has better things to do than go back and forth on Twitter with a damn random? Like, the reason why he does this is pretty interesting, but also just very stupid. He says there are people on the internet giving him false accusations with no repercussions because they hide behind social media without ever having to show their face. It's honestly fair that he's frustrated by these things, but his actions are just stupid. He's also gone into it with clubs before. During the 2022 transfer window, Brighton posted Marco Cucurella was going nowhere, which contradicted Fabrizio's earlier reporting. Fabrizio then replied with, "We'll see who's right." And that turned out to be a very epic mic drop moment, especially because the transfer went through. The problem is, this guy makes everything a spectacle just to garner more engagement. At times, it really feels like Fabrizio is just a fan page. Fabrizio just doesn't hold the professionalism you think a person of his caliber would have. Instead, he often posts things mocking certain fan bases, essentially making a mockery of football journalism. This guy has personally met some of the biggest players in the world. He resorts to some internet trolling. Honestly, it's just pathetic, but that's when you realize that Fabrizio isn't really a journalist, although he wants you to think he's a journalist, but he's actually just a content creator. You don't expect journalists to take shady sponsorships and be chronically online. That's more online with a YouTuber. Fabrizio was always like this from the very beginning. It just took a little fame and money just to show him who he really was. When Fabrizio was working for FC Inter, he somehow got an interview with a major Inter star. Hold up, wait a minute. Not really. He somehow got catfished and did a fake interview. I think the interesting thing is what happened after he published the article with the Interstar. The club denied it, the Interstar denied it, but Fabrizio maintained that it was genuine. The fact that he's so stubborn shows that he can't acknowledge he's ever in the wrong. Even his catchphrase, "Here we go," is stolen. A former colleague of Fabrizio came up with that phrase and was using it, but Fabrizio did not like that. On 2 occasions, Fabrizio messaged his former colleague saying not to use the "Here we go." And that's how I know Fabrizio was probably genuinely mad when people were doing variations of "Here we go." Like the "Here we land" kid, Fabrizio was probably like fuming underneath. Now knowing all this information, what do you really think about Fabrizio Romano? Although I think it's insane to me, but despite all of these controversies I brought up, Fabrizio is just too big to go down because ultimately what he does is so valuable and no one else can replicate. It's like these big corporations like Nestle have all these problems like child labor, slave labor, and water exploitation. But guess what? We're all still going to use their products. Just like when the transfer window rolls around, we'll all click the notification bell and Fabrizio will give us the news